everyone. So, first of all, Akemi and I are we have become accustomed to everyone leaving for this conversation. And that doesn't matter because we will speak to anyone who's in the audience. So everyone that stayed, you're the smart ones in this room because regulatory matters. So this is something that we've started doing at BeautyMatter events because the regulatory environment has been, I don't know if it has ever been more complex or more unsettled in decades. And the changes are coming faster and faster. And they show no signs of slowing down, both domestically and in Europe. And compliance and regulations are no longer siloed to the regulatory department. They affect everyone, from marketing to product development to packaging. So the Independent Beauty Association is a trade association for independent beauty businesses. So that's everything from suppliers to retailers to brands. And they are our voice. So when MOCRA was going through the rulemaking in Congress, they were at the table with the FDA telling them how these regulations impact our businesses. So if you're not a member, you should be a member. I have been a member for, I'm not even going to tell you how long, but it's been a very long time. So it's everything from certificates of free sales to it's an amazing community of suppliers and resources. But most importantly, we have to, as independent beauty brands, if we all come together, we have a big voice, but it only happens if we all come together. So Akemi and other people from the IBA come and we do sort of these fast track updates on what's in the regulatory pipeline. We keep it short and sweet because we know not the sexiest subject, but as Akemi says, she will keep you out of jail and she will help you avoid fines. So with that, so we have a new administration, we all know. Yeah. And with that, we have a dramatically different view on corporate oversight. So what does the US regulatory landscape look like today? And how has that impacted, if at all, kind of MOCRA rolling out?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for this platform. I'm very excited to address all of you. I think that we all know, that this administration has really kind of shaken up the regulatory agency sort of oversight at the federal level. We definitely have seen not only a much sort of less rigorous approach around like regulatory oversight. They really want to pull back a lot of the regulations, but we've also seen a lot of turnover in the agencies. So I do think at the federal level, there's just a lot in flux and a lot that's unsettled. With the FDA in particular, I think they're much more focused on the MAHA agenda than like looking at cosmetics. So they're much more focused on probably MAHA and to some degree pharma. And so I think cosmetics is a little bit under the radar, and for right now, that's probably a good thing given how unsettled everything is. With respect to MOCRA, so for those of you who don't know, that's the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act that was passed in 2022. We were kind of halfway through implementation. So the things that are in place, we are advising people to make sure you are doing. So product registration, facility registration, adverse event reporting, those things need to absolutely just be in place because those are required. The things that we're supposed to roll out, so fragrance allergens, that is now I think not coming out until like mid-2026 at the earliest. GMP guidance has been put on the, there's sort of like a later list of things to do, which I think that we're probably not going to see for the next 12 months, like anything on GMPs. So the one thing that they did do, actually, which brands probably should take note of, is there is something called the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System. This is a public dashboard where you can go and see any adverse events that have been reported to the FDA. In September, they created one specifically for cosmetics. So this is one where like a company, a consumer, anybody can like post, submit, an adverse event report, and these could be serious adverse events, voluntary events, that then the public could actually go and see. So this is something to just be aware of and maybe be checking and tracking. You should already have some sort of adverse event reporting process or program. If you don't, come talk to me. We'll give you some names of folks who can help you with that. But that is something that they did move forward actually with respect to MOCRA. But a lot of the other things that haven't been implemented yet, we're probably not going to see until 26 or beyond.
So what are some of the other laws and regulations that should be on everyone's radar? Because we also, it's not just what's happening on the national level, but we get to watch what state by state wants to regulate too.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the case that this sort of pullback at the federal level has definitely meant that the states have swooped in to really take over with respect to regulatory oversight. In fact, I've talked with a regulator who said, like, we see it and we know it. We know the feds aren't doing it, so we're going to do it. The problem certainly for producers, folks who have to comply with this, is that you now have 50 different rules, right? This regulator even was like, we see also that like, I don't know, California will come in with a rule, and then New York, and then each state comes in with a slightly different twist. So they see it too. And actually, what we've been doing is kind of talking with them about how do we help them understand the impact of that ratcheting up, right, state by state by state. So some of the things to be aware of at the state level, I'm going to give you kind of like, maybe this is like the top 5. Like here's like the countdown, right? Like the 5 things you need to know. So number 5, I talked about MOCRA, and so I think that's like kind of the first one. If you're not, that's the base. Like if you haven't looked at that, look at that. But number 4 is, I would say, Washington State. So the Department of Ecology had passed the Toxic-Free Cosmetics Act. One of the provisions in that was like a lead limit that was very low, much lower than the federal level. We actually worked with them along with a few other industry associations to create an interim policy. So that is one that if you haven't looked at, you probably should take a look at, because that interim policy on lead went into effect in January. And there are 2 different options you can choose. You do have to let the state know if you're not meeting their lead limit in statute. But that is one to kind of take a look at. They are actually actively looking for data and information from companies who cannot meet this lead limit. So if you want to talk more about that, let me know. The other thing in Washington is a formaldehyde ban. So that is actually going to go into effect, I think, in January 2027. So, cannot have intentionally added formaldehyde releasing ingredients in your product. So that's number 4. Number 3 would be, I'm going to say like musks and microplastics. So fragrance has been in the crosshairs for a long time, continues to be in the crosshairs. AB 60, I think, in California passed, and that is a sort of musk reduction act. So it prohibited or restricted a number of musk ingredients. So if you are in fragrance or have fragrance ingredients, like make sure you're checking with your fragrance supplier whether or not you're using any of these ingredients and whether they can be used in the state of California. And then microplastics, like this is a really big issue. It's a big issue globally. The one that everyone was worried about was a microbead bill in California. The governor actually vetoed that one just recently. It was a microbead and glitter bill. And I think we're seeing kind of like how they regroup. But what was interesting was the governor said, while he supports not having plastics, microplastics, he was concerned that the wording of the bill could unintentionally prohibit things like biodegradable, or natural alternatives. And so they didn't want to outright ban those things. So I think there's some more work being done there. Number 2 is PFAS. So if you don't know what PFAS is, come and talk to me. I know there's some lawyers in here as well. You can talk to them as well. This is very, very hot legislation everywhere. I think at the state level, for January 2025, I think California, Colorado, I think Maryland, Washington, there are like 5 states that already have PFAS bans on the books, enforceable now, January 2025. There's like another 6 or so that are starting enforcement in 2026. A bunch of the New England states have that coming. And then there's another 9 that we're expecting to see legislation show up in 2026 in the next session. So this is a very, very hot issue. They're all some version of prohibiting the sale, distribution, manufacture of cosmetics that contain intentionally added PFAS. I think this is a very big challenge for this industry because it requires you to go back through your supply chain for every single ingredient to understand whether or not there's PFAS included, which could be like a side additive for processing. It also is very difficult for this industry because there are PCR requirements, in the CPG industry, and packaging could introduce PFAS into your products. It's also challenging because the testing is not very good right now. So the one thing I would say for PFAS is if you are not sure if you have this in your product, definitely talk with a regulatory professional. Definitely talk with an attorney and maybe a testing facility, because there really are limited tools to test for this, and often they're testing for the presence of total fluorine, which there's fluorine in a lot of things, right? And once you create data, you can't take it back. So I think before you start testing and going down this path, understand what data you're trying to get and understand what you're going to do with it, and understand what you're going to do with it if the data comes back negative or positive for the presence of these materials. So, that's number 2 is PFAS. The number 1 that I'm going to bring to you, I've talked about this over and over and over, but I'm going to say it again, is EPR. It's extended producer responsibility and some packaging laws. So this industry has been so focused on ingredients that I think packaging and the emergence of packaging and waste management laws has just taken everybody by surprise. And so there are sweeping extended producer responsibility laws across the US. There are now 6 states, so California, Colorado, Minnesota, Oregon, Washington, and I'm forgetting one, Maine, have all passed extended producer responsibility laws for packaging. So this is shifting the burden of the cost of waste management of these packaged materials, shifting that to the producers and away from the municipalities. The state governments are very interested in this because it's essentially a tax, right, on businesses, and it allows them to then get additional money to cover a lot of municipal projects, capital waste projects. So this is one to watch, and it has pretty sweeping requirements. Essentially, you have to register in these states as an obligated producer. You have to report data of the packaging that you're using, including the type of packaging, how much it is, and then the organization is going to assess a fee on your business based on what you're distributing or selling in the state. And so imagine that you have 6 of these, and we know another I think probably another 9 or so are going to have bills again tee up in the 26th legislative session. So this is a really big one. And the thing that's kind of interesting about this, it dovetails with a couple of other things. There are PCR laws also that feed into these. Washington's PCR law, if you're not compliant, if you make a product and anything that's from 8 fluid ounces to 5 gallons and you're selling in the state of Washington, you're supposed to have 15% PCR in your packaging, in your plastic packaging, starting January this year. So if you don't, if you're not registered, if you don't have that in, you're in violation if you're selling in Washington. And they did start fining people. So last year they were fining, they've rolled this out, and last year they had started fining, and I think it was like a $400,000 fine that they were sort of bringing in from various groups. So these packaging-related laws are big, but the reason that this extended producer responsibility I put number one is because Vermont literally, I think like a month ago, just passed a bill, maybe it was a month or two ago, passed a bill that's an extended producer responsibility law focused on hazardous waste in the household. So household hazardous waste, which could include nail polish, hairspray, nail polish remover, anything that might be like flammable or ignitable could be considered hazardous waste. And you now have to register in the state of Vermont if you are selling any of these products. And you have to do that by November 1st, 2025, like in a week or two. So, so this is like a trend that we're starting to see. You know, extended producer responsibility is not new. Mattresses, tires, paint follow those kinds of regulations, but we're starting to now see it kind of seep into cosmetics in a few different ways, and that is really challenging for small businesses to track and to be compliant with.
Yeah. So do we have any questions? We have a question here.
Hello? Hi. Oh, can you hear me? Thanks so much. I'm glad I'm the smart one in the room, along with all of you worrying about this, because this packaging thing got me a little scared. Could you just clarify it a bit more? Like, is it paper packaging? Like, how are the packaging laws? Like, I'm ChatGPT after you talked about it, so it just seems unclear. Like, the paper will be charged for the paper that we have in our boxing?
Yeah, it depends on the state. California, for example, you have to report all of your packaging. California has a law on the books that by 2032, all packaging sold in the state has to be compostable or recyclable. And so that feels really hard to do, especially for this industry. But they are tracking everything. So they want paper, they want glass, they want plastic, they want aluminum. Like any kind of packaging, you actually have to report into the state. And each state has sort of different requirements about what kind of packaging they want reported.
So we wrote a couple articles on this. There's also a regulatory, well, it's a conference, but it is heavy regulatory, that IBA puts on twice a year. It's called Cosmicon, yeah? And well, sort of worth the investment. The other thing about IBA memberships are they are for your entire team. So for independent beauty brands, what is the revenue threshold for the early stage?
$500,000 or less, yeah.
So for $500,000 or less, you're literally paying roughly $500 for your entire team to get access to content and also to get access to resources. So it's definitely, I have my my board hat on now. Definitely worth sort of the investment. But are there any other questions? We have time for one more. Yep.
And just while we're getting the mic up, we do have our Cosmetics Convergence conference coming up November 12th and 13th. It's totally virtual, so you don't have to fly anywhere. You don't have to get a hotel. And we're making a discount for BeautyMatter attendees. So if you want to sign up, you'll get 25% off the non-member price if you're not a member, and you can use code IBABM25. You can come find me. I also have a QR code. If you guys want a little handout with some of the things that I've talked about today, come find me, and you can just like scan the QR code, and we'll send you a little.
Yeah. We also have Liz in the front seat. Liz, why don't you stand up so people know who you are? Liz is also with IBA and can answer questions, but go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering, how does everything you're seeing and saying about plastics apply to or intersect with non-petroleum-based plastics? Like, do you see a future and relevancy for bio-based plastics? Because they're not all created equal.
Very good question. I don't think from a regulatory standpoint that there's necessarily a distinction, right? So I think that they see, because they're looking at it from a waste management standpoint. So whether or not something is renewable or comes from a renewable resource, sugar cane, whatever, they're like, I still have to dispose of it. And so, for example, in California, if you can't recycle PLA, it doesn't count as being recyclable because California's definition of recyclable is that it has to be recycled in 60% of the municipalities and 60% of the material has to be recycled. So I think that there's some challenge, I think, with some of these laws and alternatives and innovation that are coming in the material space. What we are seeing is that there is some pushback. So we have seen people push back on the legislation and say, you are stifling innovation. We've seen it on the compostable side. We've also seen things like the gable top cartons, so milk cartons. When California did their first material characterization, milk cartons didn't meet this threshold they were looking for to count it as recyclable. And everybody went bonkers because the milk industry's like, are you kidding me? We send these to schools and institutions and they're all in recycling programs. And they were 2% under this threshold. So I do think that there's room for conversations about innovation. And I do think that the more you can get involved, whether you want to or through us, I think that's the kind of feedback that we need to give to these regulators and to these legislators, that you could be really inadvertently stifling innovation and stifling new product forms, new materials from really coming forward because they're discouraged given the way the statutes are written.
Yeah. Well, Akemi, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
So Liz and Akemi are available if you guys have any more questions. Thanks for staying, and now it's lunch. And because you stayed, you get the secret that there is two lunch setups. There's one here, and there's another one in the networking room. So the one in the networking room may be less crowded. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.